Brother Gene and I were talking this morning about how it just seems like school was out. Uh, May 22 was the last day for several in high school around the area. And this week we're going back for a number in our area, some in college, maybe another couple of weeks from now. But generally speaking, wife and I were talking to somebody the other day how it used to be right around Labor Day for most of us. And that was when we'd go back and get out around Memorial Day. And it's backed up a little sooner into August, still warm weather. But I always felt when I was going to school, here's a great time to make some changes for good. And anything I did that really was not too helpful in trying to progress, I wanted to put it away. Of course, I wasn't always successful. And yet it's a time where last year is gone. We can't change a thing about it, but we're encroaching on a new year and things are fresh. We have fresh teachers who don't know us perhaps, and everything is just ready to embark on something that is good. I think a school year is very significant for young people and for people who are associated with schools, whether it be teachers, administrators, drivers, whoever they may be. I think it's significant because I'm not sure that any student is quite the same at the end of a school year that he or she was at the beginning of the school year. School years change us. They changed me. The perspectives, the involvement with people of the world, people in a learning environment. There's just really nothing exactly like a school year. And I know after the behavior I've seen among some students, here may be some squabbling going on in the summer passes. They come back and, well, they're friends, or at least they've matured. They're just changes. Our perspectives of people and things as we mature, they change. And again, I don't think I've ever seen a time, including within myself, where I was different after the school year than I was when the year began. And certainly there will be people in administration and in teaching positions that will try to teach you or influence you, change your thinking in ways that are different from what you've heard here, from me talking, and from likely your parents. We will be expected to do some things that we've been taught that we shouldn't do. That was true with me in middle school. There were some things that some wanted to involve in dances and school plays, and I think I can't do that. And then in high school, basic, for me at least, it was what you'd wear in PE. I just thought, from what I know the Bible says, I wasn't even a Christian, but from what I'd heard and what I'd read, this can't be right. And your associates, even in college life, become such where drinking, drugs, casual sex is just par for the course. It's just understood. Profanity, laced language, sentences with all kinds of vulgarities, that's just common. And you say, well, I know some did that, but I didn't do that. And it's almost like you're expected to participate in that. You'll change your priorities. Most teachers teach in such a way that they think that their class is the only class you've got. That you put all your eggs in one basket, you do all you can in this class. And if you're in athletics, a coach is coaching as if your life depends on you doing this one thing that I'm asking you to do, whether work out or what. And if you're in the band, it's the same way. A friend of mine and I were talking just recently about the high school, how much has changed since we were children insofar as travel teams and year-round sports where young people, especially teenagers, have very little time to themselves. It's just one thing, and if a girl plays softball in the spring, then there's traveling clubs, and then there's fall ball, then there's or soccer, and then there's volleyball or basketball, and then there's back in softball. You just go just all year round, and it's busy. It's extremely busy. I'm not saying those things are wrong. I'm just saying that a lot of times that we get involved in those things and our lives fly by, and we've been devoted to those things. And parents can be caught up in all of it. Grades can be the most important thing that we do. We've got to do well. We want to be popular and have some worldly honor, some social success. And we've got to prepare ourselves to make a lot of money. And yet those are just not really the most important things in life. But at that time in life of young people, a lot of people think it is. Those things are paramount. They are the things that are certainly most important. I'd like to think about a passage, though, with you that Paul told Timothy. It's in the context of when grievous times would come, and there were all kinds of problems that Timothy would have to deal with. And Paul told him, "But abide thou in the things," or continue, some translations say, "in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them." I think at least 2 or 3 ideas I want to share with you on this. The word "things" throughout 1st and 2nd Timothy is an interesting word. Obviously the things, these things teach, or if you will put the brethren in mind of these things, or abide thou in these things, it would obviously be the things that Paul taught. But for Timothy, some of the things would have been the Old Testament that his mother and his grandmother had taught him. Things that are truths about God and people, precepts, principles of right and wrong in Scripture. And he says abide or continue in them. Don't forget them. When we get to school, it doesn't matter if it's middle school, high school, college. Sometimes we're away and all of a sudden we want to compartmentalize and say, well, you know, that's in the church building. That's then, this is now. And he says, don't do that. Don't do that. Abide in the things which you have learned and have been assured of. Timothy was taught these things. He had learned them, and he had seen evidence for their truthfulness. And the same is true with us. We can be taught truths. We can learn them. They can be a part of us. We can have evidences explained to us from other parts of the Bible how this has to be the truth of God on this particular subject. And we can be assured of those. We can be certain based on those evidences that are brought to bear. And then he mentions, and knowing of whom thou hast learned them. Knowing of whom thou hast learned them. Remember who taught you. With Timothy, it would have been his mother and his grandmother, and it would have been Paul and Barnabas on the first journey. And I think that when we're taught truths as young people, and as we're growing, college, maybe postgraduate work, whatever the case is, as we grow, we don't need to forget the great, solemn, pillared truths that we have been taught that are constant, that they don't change. They're true. Remember who taught you. People who love you, family, brethren, people who were teaching you in Bible classes, people who love you and want the best for you. That's not to say that people in the school setting don't care, but the ones who care the most for you and who love you the most are your brethren, people in the church, and family who want your best interest. But I think there are at least three principles or ideas that should run throughout. And this goes from elementary, the smallest grades, all the way through postgraduate school. At least these three principles. And one of them is found in Proverbs. The fear of the Lord, you remember, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, chapter 1, verse 7. And in chapter 9, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You can take this to the bank, that anything that leaves God out of the equation, that does not have some principle of truth, is questionable. It's questionable. And so if there is some principle of right or wrong, or right that is violated in some activity or some thought process in school, then I need to be aware of that. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's the beginning of wisdom, and anything outside or leaving God out of the picture needs to be questioned. Brother Lindy Hedrick, told me years ago, and it stuck with me, and I've seen the quote since that time. But he had a professor at David Lipscomb College at the time, in the late 40s, who taught a sociology class. And he told me that he was an older man. He'd gone through Peabody, and he said he'd call them scholars. He says, "Scholars, I want you to remember it's always right to do right, and it's always wrong to do wrong." And Brother Hedrick would always follow that up by saying, when I first heard him say that, I thought, well, everybody knows that. What's so deep about that? And then he thought about it for a while, and it came to appreciate the fact that not everybody thinks that. That yes, it's right to do right, but maybe on one occasion or two occasions, maybe on this occasion I can do wrong and it'll be okay, it'll be right. Or this practice is this kind of morality or immorality is always wrong, but maybe it's right just on this occasion. And so the simplicity of that idea, it's always right to do right, it's always wrong to do wrong, is a simple principle of truth that's oftentimes foregone. And then a third thing I think that ought to go through with us, it doesn't matter if we're kindergarten through postgraduate, and that is that whatever we're doing, we need to seek God's kingdom, that His rule, the church, things that pertain to that, and His righteousness, that is His right ways, all things that are right, any relationship, this is the right behavior, any idea, this is the right thought process. That seek first in time, seek first in importance, in priority, God's kingdom and His righteousness. I think I may have told you about a girl, a lady, she's a few years older than I am, and she's dead now. But she went to school in state, went away and studied a particular area of expertise. And her area required that she miss a lot of Sunday night, Wednesday night. Her nights were filled in a type of lab work. And she said, "Philip, I just thought, the Lord knows what I'm doing. I'm just going to give this semester over to doing this. I know I should." She conscientiously, I should say this, she put her conscience in her back pocket. She just shoved it back there and tried to go onward. And it wasn't long, she became unfaithful and she died, really a skeptic. She destroyed her faith, is what she did. She destroyed it. She allowed being away, being in school, having the priorities that were the demands of school to just destroy her faith. And I believe if we go through school and we still think seeking first God's kingdom in His right ways, that's got to take top priority in time and importance. Doesn't mean that studying of these subjects is not important. No, that's important. But this is most important when we, as some people say, prioritize. I believe Daniel provides a very wonderful example of a person who's in school. In fact, I was telling Landon this morning, I was asking him, did he have a back to school lesson? And he did not, as you know. And I said, well, I've thought about talking about Daniel at UAB. That's Daniel at the University at Babylon. But anyway, I'm not too much on topics like that. But Daniel does provide a tremendous example of how to prioritize our time and our behavior when we are in a setting, an academic setting. If you'll turn with me to the book of Daniel, I'd like to look at the first chapter, and we'll put it real quickly in a setting. If you'll look at chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, this would be about 606 to 605 BC. The first deportation of Jews was in 606, and the next was in 597, then 586. You remember Jerusalem was destroyed. So in the 3rd year came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of gold. He carried them into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So here you have a conquering king, conquering nation. They've taken some of the items of worship that are precious to you and your people. They are in honor of the God of heaven. They've taken that away. They've taken some of your friends away. They are the conquering army, the conquering nation. Well, in verse 3, the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring in certain of the children of Israel, even of the seed royal, that be descendants of the king, and of the nobles, youths in whom was no blemish, and well favored, some translations say good looking, and skillful in all wisdom, and endued with knowledge and understanding science. They had some academic abilities. And such as had ability to stand in the king's palace. In other words, they had potential, we would say. We can see good things from them. And that he should teach them the learning and tongue of the Chaldeans, the language, some translations say, the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily portion of the king's dainties or delicacies, and of the wine which he drank, and that they should be nourished 3 years. There's a 3-year degree there. That at the end thereof they should stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the prince of the eunuchs gave names unto them. Unto Daniel he gave the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's dainties, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God made Daniel to find kindness and compassion in the sight of the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your food and your drink, or for why should he see your faces worse looking than the youths that are your own age? So would ye endanger my head with the king? He didn't want to go along with Daniel's plan not to eat of the king's delicacy. Then said Daniel, he had an alternate plan now. Daniel said to the steward, whom the prince of the eunuchs had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants. Well, let's go through a test. I beseech thee, a 10-day test. Let them give us pulse or vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the youths that eat of the king's dainties, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. Well, as we continue the reading, that's exactly what happened, and their complexion was better than their contemporaries, and they were doing better in school. Everything worked out according to the plan. So there were some requirements that put Daniel in more of a type of an elite group here at the University of Babylon. He was among these that had potential to serve in the king's court. He was of the king's descendants, the seed royal, and of nobles, youths in whom was no blemish. Evidently there was no deformity, nothing that would slow them down insofar as their academic training as well as physical training was concerned. They were skillful in all wisdom. They possessed knowledge and understanding of science, or quick to understand. They were agile in their ability to comprehend things. They had ability to serve in the king's palace, or at least, as we've already mentioned, they had potential. Well, you think about all of that. There's requirements. There's a type of a status there. You're in school. Sometimes we get in clubs. Here's a club if we academically achieve this, or something that may be of a service, and we kind of feel good about ourselves from it. Well, that's where Daniel was in Babylon. Well, the plan that was, and we can really see it in chapter 1, the plan involved the same 4 areas that Luke said Jesus grew in. You remember in Luke 2, verse 52, Jesus advanced in stature and in favor with in knowledge and in favor with God and man. You have the advancement academically, physically, socially, and spiritually. All 4 areas. And that's exactly what they had here. In verse 4, they were to be taught the language and literature of the Chaldeans. Well, I don't know if that would be too much wrong with that. There is an idea that there was astrology and sorcery would be objectionable. We see that that was a part of evidently some of the curriculum in chapter 2. And Daniel understood that was just nothing but foolishness. But the teaching the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And then physical and social training. A daily portion of the king's dainties or delicacies and of the wine which he drank. I'm reminded when I was in school, high school and college as well, a lot of people complained of the cafeteria food. Oh, it's just terrible. And it's just this way. It's mystery meat and all that. And it was just something complained all the time. I never thought it was all that bad, but I carried my lunch sometimes in high school. But nonetheless, you had not with Daniel. He wasn't eating in the cafeteria at the university. He was eating on the king's table. And whatever these king's dainties or delicacies were that he said would defile himself, obviously were some of the dietary restrictions that had been imposed by the Mosaic Law. Perhaps some pork, perhaps shellfish, something like that. That was common among them. Daniel said, I'm not going to do that. And then the wine which he drank, the kind of intoxicating wine that is condemned really throughout the Bible, he was not going to be a part of that as well. And so the physical and the social aspects of his training, he proposed in his heart not to defile himself. Then you might not see it immediately, but it seemed like to me that there was a religious training that went on as well in the names that we have. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were their Hebrew names. And you may notice the endings of their names all deal with some aspect of God. Daniel and Mishael, the El in the end of the names referenced Elohim, which is a Hebrew name for God. And Hananiah and Azariah with the Ayah was a part of the Jehovah name. Some say Yahweh. But whatever that was a part of it. Other, Nehemiah, Isaiah, others in the Bible share the same names. And so their names gave credence or respectability, association, we might say, with Jehovah God. But their names were changed. But Daniel was changed to Belteshazzar, Hananiah to Shadrach, Mishael to Meshach, Azariah to Abednego. And it's interesting that Baal was one of the gods, Baal, one of the Phoenician gods, but Baal, one of the gods of the Babylonians, and Ek was another, and Nego from Abednego was in honor of another god that they served. So the names that were assigned to Daniel and his friends really were associated with pagan idolatry. And it's interesting that through the book of Daniel, it doesn't seem that Daniel, makes a big stink about the changing of the names. At least it's not recorded. He's not rebellious to say, "How dare you do?" That's just not there. Throughout the book of Daniel, he refers to himself as I, Daniel. And he refers to his friends as Shadrach, Meshach, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He refers to them by their Hebrew names. And so it seems like, reference to him, he let that pass. There wasn't a whole lot he could do. Sometimes when in school, people are cruel. And they'll assign big names to us because maybe our size or how we look or the color of our hair or something, and that it'll be pot shots taken at us. So some of you may be familiar with that. I was. I had the same thing as I'm sure some of you did. And you don't care for it at all. but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And if you raise a big stink about it, people just, oh, I got him, And the best thing to do is just ignore it and go ahead. And when when somebody asks your name, just tell them what your name really is, and instead of bowing down to the whims of others. It's interesting when you think about what Daniel went through in Babylon. There are some excuses Daniel could have given that I've heard throughout life. Excuses where he could have said, well, maybe I can give in. For instance, he could have said, well, I'm a long way from home. No one will know. It could very well be just high school or middle school away from home. It could be college somewhere. Nobody knows. Nobody here knows me. They don't know my past, and nobody in my past knows what I'm doing now. Nobody will know. Joseph could have made that statement, couldn't he, in Genesis 39, when he was at Potiphar's house and Potiphar's wife seduced him. He could have said, my father doesn't care about me. My brothers sold me. I do whatever I want. Nobody will ever know what's the difference. But Daniel didn't do that. That did not appeal to him to compromise. And he could have thought, look at the position I'm in. God has abandoned me. What kind of a God do I serve who's going to let all these bad things happen to me? And here I've been trying to do right. And he could have used that argument. So if you can't lick them, join them. I'm going to give in, give over, give up. He could have argued, well, just one compromise won't hurt. Just one time. I know this is what I was taught back over in Jerusalem, but I'm not in Jerusalem now. And maybe just giving in this one time. Maybe it's a report that's due. Or some paper, large paper that's due. I've written some of those myself, and they can get they can stretch you out, all-nighters and that kind of thing. But reports that we might cheat on, or a homework assignment, or perhaps we decide, I don't know exactly how. When I was in school, you could cheat in a number of different ways. I remember people putting in a big pen, put a little cheat sheet in a big pen and take it out. It's all kinds of ways, right on your hand, all kinds of things that people would do to basically tell the teacher, I know this when I don't. Basically, it's a lie. Cheating is a lie. A drink at a party. Being a part of a fraternity or a sorority. Sometimes I've talked to young people going in school and I've warned them about fraternities and sororities. Well, there's a lot of good service work that they do. Yes, and there's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of sexual activity that goes on. And for whatever good that might be accomplished service-wise, you've got a whole lot of evil, a whole lot of cheating going on. You can get by in school without being a part of a sorority or a fraternity. Or when you get away from school, absenting yourself from Bible study, from faithful congregations who are seeking to do the Lord's will. And, if we've obeyed the gospel and we're Christians, then we have obligations, and even obligations in local congregations. I'm happy to hear of what goes on in some schools in the state, some churches in the state where their state schools located, and how the elders are very concerned about involving the young people who are the freshmen who are coming in. If they're Christians, that we want your name, we want to know, we want you to be involved. It's not like for the next 4 or 5 years, however long it takes you to graduate, you just kind of come and go as you please and a member of the church at large. No, you're a part of this. And I think that's right. But what happens is, well, it's just only for a year. I'll compromise this year. Or it's just while I'm in school. I'm going to turn around and do differently once I get out. Let's not do that. Daniel could have done that. He could have said, well, just this one time. But that was an excuse he could have given. Or I'll lose my scholarship. I know there's nothing in the Bible about scholarships, but if you take the qualifications, the requirements that were on these people who were to be in the king's palace and serve in the king's court, that They had some special privileges that not everybody had. And the same is true with friendships that we develop. How some people think of us. Perhaps there's a particular club that we're a part of, or musical group, or sports club, or something else that we're a part of. And I don't want to lose the good thinking, and so I'll kind of go along. We get along by going along. And in Daniel's case, they just might kill me. This was, life and death proposition. Here's a matter, you do this, this, this in order that you will be qualified to serve in my court. They might kill me if I do otherwise. And I think a lot of times young people are pressed by thinking, I've got to give in here, I've got to do this over here, or else I'm not going to get my degree, then I'm going to be in student debt, student loans, and then what am I going to do? What am I going to tell parents? What am I going to tell people who've tried to help me, people who've been supportive of me? I'm going to let them down, I'm going to feel bad about myself, and it's depressing, and so it's a cavalcade of all these things cascading down, and so people give in and try to get out the easy way. Daniel had an additional idea here too, I believe. If Daniel, being a Jew, serving the king of Babylon, he could have used those credentials, if you please. He could use the credentials and really his presence in a particular position to involve his own people. He could say, I need to let some of these things go because it's going to advance me now. And when I'm advanced now, what it will do is I can help my people later. It's a heady argument, but I've heard this before. A fellow said, well, just go ahead and you just do what's necessary to make your grades, get a good job, and look how much you can do for the Lord later. Same idea. You make sacrifices, you compromise now spiritually, failing to do what you know is right, in order that you somehow might turn around and do more good later. That doesn't make good nonsense. But those are some excuses that Daniel could have lived. Well, how did Daniel avoid all of these sins? Well, I go back to verse 8. But, here's what all is going on, but. Transition. Daniel proposed or purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's dainties or with the wine which he drank. He purposed in his heart. In other words, he didn't wait. He could see read the tea leaves, see the handwriting on the wall, pardon the pun. But he could see, okay, this is what is expected out of me if I go in this area of expertise. If I am in this club, if I'm on this ball team, if I'm on this band, I'm in this course, I'm doing all these things, then this was what is going to be demanded of me. Can I be faithful and do all of these things? Daniel knew all of these things were going, and so he purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's dainties. He decided in essence beforehand what he was going to do, and he did it. And that's what we have to do as young people and as older people. I know we don't have as many young people with us, but as older people, as parents and grandparents, we can help our younger people by teaching these truths, that to decide beforehand what we are going to do when we have assignments and homework, how are we going to get it done, what is the time frame, and always balance out, here's the Lord's cause, and I'm going to be a part of that. Not going to do anything that would get me outside of that. So how am I going to budget my time to get all these other things done? Homework, tests. I'm going to purpose in my heart never to cheat. When I was teaching Bible at the Bible school up in Athens, sometimes I would have the young people to write a report. And I'll tell you, I would tell them, here's whether it be Isaac, I want you to write a page on Abraham. I want you to write a page on Peter. And you can use Bible dictionaries, you can use references in your Bible, but I just want you to write just one page on this particular Bible subject or Bible character usually. And you can type it or you can handwrite it. And from some ninth graders, I saw vocabulary words that I'd never read before. I'd say, and of course I'd always preface, I want this to be your own words. You can read, but I want you to put it in your own words. It doesn't matter how simple. I just want you to be straightforward and honest with me. And there would be a few, and I could find out now with AI. Oh, I'll tell you what. If some of you, I know some more young people have done this, but if you go on Google and then artificial intelligence on something, you can have a whole article that sounds outstanding. And I know that there are some applications, some software that teachers can use to try to scan and then find out where students. But try your best. Try your best. It's more time consuming. I know this, my friends. It's more time consuming. But try your best to read a large amount and then put it back in your own words. And don't plagiarize, in other words. Projects due. How to behave on dates. You're going to determine beforehand. Mom's not here, Dad's not here, and I have more freedom than I've been having, or if I'm in middle school and I had some interest shown, or high school and have interest shown in me. This is how I'm going to behave on dates. I'm going to determine beforehand this, it's only going this far, no farther. And we're going to do that one way or the other. We're going to purpose in our heart. Another thing I think Daniel did was he chose good friends who would stand with him. He chose good friends who would stand with him. Most of us went to schools where the majority of people around us were not Christians, or the teachers were not Christians. There's some schools that are, but most are not. And we were in school, especially if we played ball and did other things, that you got some drinking going on even among underage people. A lot of things that are going, and even in that though, you can usually look around and find 2 or 3 who don't do all of that. When I was in high school, prom was big, and I didn't go. And you know, you have that feeling, people know that I don't go. Wonder what they're thinking. I'm not going to go, but what else could I do? A couple of years in a row, there was a friend of mine who played ball with me, and he and I got together. We went out and got a burger or something like that, just to get away. And you can usually, even among people who are not Christians, you can find some young people who have some morality about them, some sense of responsibility. Look for those people. Don't look for the worst ones, but look for the people who will be good friends who can stand with you. And when they stand with you, what ends up being, you say, I'm not the only one. I can make it. I can make it. There's another thing about Daniel that I think, there's some young people who have kind of a rebellious spirit. I've seen some young people who are members of the church have more of a rebellious spirit, and then they ask, well, I can't do this, it's Wednesday night. And they say, well, that your behavior doesn't really match what your request is. In Daniel, if you'll notice, he was told, you're not, you were to eat of the king's dainties and so on. He proposed or purposed in himself not to do that or drink the wine. And then this prince of the eunuchs said, well, I'm going to get killed if you don't do what. Then Daniel actually made a type of, let me go to the next point. He offered a reasonable alternative to the demand that was made on him. In verse 11, then said Daniel to the steward, verse 12, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. Let them give us pulse or vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee. And let's just see in other words, give a reasonable kind of response and alternative. I was told you when I was in high school, the kind of gym or PE wear was really what I thought then, what I think now was immodest. And if you try to be cooperative with the administration, with teachers, and you're not a rebellious kind of a guy or girl who's always kicking, always prodding the teacher, and you say, look, this really bothers me. If I had a letter from someone, could this? Yes. It's been my observation that people will go just like they did with Daniel. They let him go that 10-day test without saying, okay, you got to do it one way or the other. No, they didn't. They let him go and just eat the pulse and water instead of the king's dainties and drink the wine which the king drank. He offered a reasonable alternative to demand, but he didn't have a rebellious spirit. And it's been my observation that sometimes if we don't come back and say, well, I'm a Christian and how dare you say that to me? Just be reasonable and still stand your ground, but be respectful. Be as polite as possible. It seems like to me that will go a whole lot farther in helping us and sometimes to get around some of the things that conscientiously we believe we couldn't be a part of. And then, of course, God was with him. Verse 9, God made Daniel to find kindness and compassion in the sight of the prince of the eunuchs. I'm not sure that was miraculous. In fact, I don't think it was miraculous. It seemed like to me, kind of like with Joseph, that God was with him, and he found favor. That God didn't turn a switch on the mind of the people over them, but it was just the good life, the good will. I remember I was talking to somebody the other day. Up in Middle Tennessee, there is a place where Sam Davis, there's a longer story that we don't have time on, but Sam Davis was a Confederate spy. He was apprehended by the Union Army, and he was over a group of Confederate soldiers. And if he had told the whereabouts of some of the commanding officers, he was promised that he could go and go back to the enemy lines and have safe passage with his horse and sidearms. And he wouldn't do it. He said, I can't betray a friend or a confidence. Well, they were going to hang him. And as they were going to have to hang him, nobody wanted to do it. Davis had so comported himself among the Union officers that they just about couldn't find anybody who wanted to do it because of the kind of a guy he was. And another part of the story that I'll go ahead and tell you, when they finally found someone who would hang him, they asked if he had a final request. And he did. He wanted to sing a hymn. And the hymn was, I am bound for the promised land. And they hung him. He's buried in Smyrna, Tennessee. But the point was that here is a spy for the enemy, but he behaved himself in such a way that he basically won the favor of people. They didn't want to hang him. They saw what kind of a fellow he was. And I think when we're genuine, honest, we don't have a rebellious spirit, and we're trying our best to go along as far as we can with things that are right, but then we hold our ground on things that are wrong, that there can be concessions made for us. There was evidences of prayer throughout Daniel. Well, overall, I think as young people we ought to enjoy this time of our lives, do our best. Don't goof off. You'll never, whatever grade you're in, whatever year in college you're going into, you'll never have it again. And so do your best in it. Treat others in such a way that you will not be ashamed to be with them in years to come. I think a lot of young people forget about that. And they treat people, disrespect them, say kinds of things. And I've told young people, I've had opportunities to address. You want to talk with them that in 10 years from now, you can come on, pat them on the back, shake their hand, and talk about the good times you had. Not how you made fun of them and it was always a put down, it was always castigated. No, just treat people with respect. And in all you do, put God and His will first. You'll be glad you did here, and especially in the hereafter. Appreciate your attention tonight. Hope our thoughts have been helpful in talking about back to school. I know we don't have a room full of young people, but we have some, and we have some people who can teach young people and help in overcoming obstacles that we may have at a real pivotal time, impressionable time in our lives. If there's something we can do to help you obey the gospel, if you believe in the Lord with all your heart, you really, maybe already in your mind, you've turned from sin and repentance. It's just a matter of confessing. I believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and I'm going to make Him Lord of my life right now. That potentially settles every difficulty you'll have. Every question you'll have on moral, financial, religious matters, it potentially settles that. And then be willing to be baptized in water for the remission of sins. And if you've done that, and in some way life has not been what it ought to be, and you want to make things right, if you could come to the front, we'll help you in any way we can as together we stand and sing.